Hello everyone, my name is Avalon and welcome back to Troll School. Over these past few weeks we've looked at a couple of things you can do with various contraptions in Mario Maker on how to make a good troll. What we haven't really done is looked at what makes a bad troll. So in this episode we're going to go through 5 things that you should not have in your troll level. We're going to start with mine and many other people's pet peeves, and that is the trusty Picador, where any of these doors could lead to this saw above us, and one of the door will lead to the correct path. Now, the issue with these is that it is complete luck. There is no way the player is going to know which door is to go through first, although some streamers have made the rule that 3 is always the correct door. That just depends on the troll maker's mood and is so inconsistent, and it's just such a poor way to kill the player. If I went through any of these doors, who knows where I could end up. Now, the Picador, Pick-a-Pipe, Pip-a-Path, whatever you want to call it, levels are significantly worse in 3D world. In a normal level, you could have a setup where you can have 10 pipes and 4 doors, and that's it. 4 doors per subworld there, so 8 doors really. But in 3D world, once you get through your first successful pick, you could find yourself facing another pick of exclamation boxes, which of course will warp you to the next area if you can guess the correct one. So at this point we've had a 1 in 3 chance followed by a 1 in 4 chance, so a 1 in 12 chance that the player is going to get this far already. And then you get to the Picador point where there's suddenly 4 doors in the player's way. So now, looking at that, you get through there, no major issue, but for a general player who doesn't know the correct route, we're now looking at a 1 in 48 chance of them getting this far, with 3 doors going to an instant death. And now, again, we have 4 pipes to look at. So the player has to make another tough decision as to which pipe they're going to go through, and having already made so many false decisions, you'd imagine that their drive is starting to wane a little bit. However, if they do get lucky and they pick the correct pipe once again, now they find themselves clearing the level. Now there was a 1 in 192 chance of getting that. And a 1 in 192 chance is just unacceptable for a fun level. I know that there is obviously the answer that once they've worked out the first one, they've then only got to get the next one. So I suppose it's only a 1 in 192 chance they get it the first time, but it doesn't change the fact that it is not a fun level setup and it is not a fun level design. My personal pet peeve for these comes in the form of these sort of ones that are simply pick a path with no distinguishable route as to which path you want to pick, where if you pick the incorrect path, you find yourself with a saw and no way forwards.
Oh, no.
There was no clue as to which path I should have taken, it was just a pick a path and go for it. Now, with all of these examples throughout the whole list, I'm going to give examples of how you can implement them into a level if you really want to, in a way that is fair to the player. Taking pick a path as our first example, we're going to take a look. So again, the right hand path is technically the incorrect path, so there's 1 in 2 chance the player's going to get it wrong. They go up the wrong path, but hilariously there is luckily a mushroom that gets dropped down, so although they think they're on the wrong path, they're actually on the right path. Didn't matter which way they went, it was just a matter of giving the illusion of a pick a path. A way to improve this further would be to delay the mushroom so the player thinks they've screwed up, but then the mushroom drops down and all is well for the player. The key point is that luck, that 50-50 chance, was taken out of the equation and the player was given a fairness in the fact that they could complete that part. It takes away some of the frustration that comes around these sort of setups. Finally, a way to look at the pick a box route in the 3D world, you can add the pressure using the sound effects and stuff. And the reason that I use the 3D world for this is once you select a box, obviously it removes it from the stage. So as you can see, there's 3 boxes there, 1 correct option, 2 incorrect options above. However, if I go through this box, you'll notice that it actually just clears 2 of the boxes from my choices, leaving only 1 box to choose from, and the 2 boxes above the spikes were in fact fake. This actually works quite well, as it gives the illusion that the player has no choice and they have to guess, but actually you as a level creator are guiding them on the correct path, and just giving them that little bit of attention just to keep them entertained. The next thing we're going to look at is softlocks, and everyone knows what a softlock is. They're quite common in all sorts of levels, but it looks like you need to go through this pipe to proceed in this level. However, once you go down, you're just met with laughter and no way to get out of this section. It's really poor, the pipe goes nowhere, the player is now dead and will have to pause and start their game over in order to move themselves forward. If you really do feel the urge to softlock the player in a way that is slightly more fair but still kind of ridiculous, you can use the exact same setup. Pipe goes nowhere, give them the laughy blocks, but give them a lava bubble that will of course end their life. Gives them a way out. There's not really a lot more to say about softlocks. Everyone knows that they're hated in all sorts of levels, and they're especially bad if you have already gone through several checkpoints. Obviously, by starting over at this stage of the level, I'm not losing anything, despite it being frustrating. At least I've not lost progress. However, if I was at, say, the second checkpoint, losing that progress would be horrible. Sticking with things that feel horrible for the player, and this is a common one in newer level design, but it is quite frustrating when a P-switch is activated and the player has to wait for that P-switch to end before they can go anywhere in the level. These P-gates are a plague across the whole of Mario, and every new creator will build them at some point before they realise how pacing of a level matters. I'm not going to try and act like some saint. I have included P-gates in levels in the past, but it is something that needs to be avoided. That wait just ruins any pacing you develop for your level. If you absolutely must have a P-switch that then precedes you through the level, the best way to prevent the player gaining that sort of P-switch advantage in a future level is a setup like this, where there's a mini game that's not difficult, and you can see the P-switches block the door in case the player is fast at the mini game, but the main thing is the bob-ombs will make the way forward for the player. Most times this will take longer than the P-switch takes to finish, so there shouldn't be any major issues for the player there. When it comes to weights, it's not just P-switches, obviously, it's also mechanisms. So here you can see the spikes before the end, so obviously something needs to come into this, and you may have caught as I walked into the door, a dry bones did go off the screen. Now, you might think I'm being ridiculous in this, but I do have video evidence in a previous video of waiting over 20 seconds for a dry bones to spawn at a knowledge checkpoint that a player's put into their level, and they thought that was okay when I gave them the feedback. These waits are just killer for your pacing. They're boring for the player. As you can see, despite talking, I have done absolutely nothing whilst waiting for this dry bone shell. And had I have accidentally gone back through the door, I would have restarted the timer and not been able to proceed in any way across what is just a simple block with a silly timer stopping the player going forwards. If you really want to hide something like this, the best thing to do is to set up a timer that's based on player proximity, using one of the many proximity sensors that you can use. Rather than having some sort of long wait. Have something the player has to do to trigger it, so that once they know how to trigger it, they don't have to wait every time. The reason that these waits are so killer for the player is because the levels are designed to kill them. So if I have to wait now for this shell to come round, and then I proceed to the level and it's not the end, then I'm going to get killed and I'm going to have to wait again. The only time this would be even slightly acceptable is if there was a checkpoint immediately after, or the finish like you can see here, and there was nothing that could possibly go wrong. Speaking of things that could go wrong, if you were making your way towards a checkpoint after having a very long wait in the previous example, you could find yourself seeing the checkpoint there and then, oh, a thwomp came off screen. Now these are terrible because there is no way that the player could possibly have predicted it, and even if the player was running full speed with that thwomp setup, there's no way they can get through to that checkpoint without a thwomp crushing them into the green pipes. So obviously once the player knows it's there, that's fine, they can trigger it, they can step away, they can wait for it to go back up, and they can make it through. But asking that of a player is just horrendously unfair, especially when the level has been killing them up to this point, to then give them that shining hope of a checkpoint and not even make it a clever way to kill them. It's just a cheap off-screen thwomp. And what's better than coming towards a checkpoint is immediately dying. So as soon as you spawn into a level, there's a thwomp above you, and it's something that will always get the player. They can only just avoid it if they are already holding down the inputs to run. This example has wings, so it chases the player as well, and once they're under, it's quite a tight run to get over to the other side. I see far too many troll levels with a thwomp like this over the starting section of the level, and I just do not understand why people think this is good level design. It is poor. If you want to see a good way to drop something on the player at the start of a level, go and look at my analysis on Delusions, because that was a fantastic troll level that included dropping stuff on the player at the start of the level. I'll put an iCard to it now because just that opening part is fantastic. Obviously it doesn't just apply to thwomps. Munchers are just as annoying. Please don't do it. If you absolutely must include an off-screen thwomp for whatever reason, or any other thing in the game that could fall on the player and just completely eliminate them from the game, consider a setup like this where there's actually like a puzzle or something for the player to be looking at. So the player's trying to push this shell through to hit the on-off switch, and then the thwomp very slowly comes down in a dramatic sense. But the key point is as well that it's part of the solution, releasing that bub-bomb to clear the way to the end of the level. But where the parachute is on that thwomp, it does give the player time to respond, and you'll also notice it is my jump that releases that thwomp down. It's not something that just happens, and the jump would be something that the player would do by trying to retrieve the shell if they didn't get the throwing timing right to get through this puzzle. Just from this puzzle's note, it's actually impossible to get it through with the blocks rotating that way, so eventually the thwomp will have to be triggered to release the bub-bomb so that the player can finish the level. This is just a simple idea of how to use an off-screen thwomp in an effective way. The parachutes make it fairer, and it's part of the solution with a lovely big area that you can block it in, both here where you won't die, and obviously over this side where you also won't die unless you are just terrible. Now those blocks have been half destroyed by that bub-bomb. Unfortunately the on-off switch has worked, and the shell net has blocked me from finishing the level. So I am actually going to have to complete this puzzle properly. Oh no, I'm not. It has kindly stopped. But there is the slow thwomp coming down. It just keeps the player entertained on the puzzle rather than watching for off-screen thwomps, and then it would be the player's fault they died to that slow-moving enemy rather than it being something that's sudden and unexpected for them. The last big do not do in a troll level is to make things too difficult for the player. So something that you see a lot of in troll levels is people really showing off how great they are as level designers, and some of the level design you see is really, really good. The only issue with it is you get situations like this one where the level is too difficult for the regular player to beat it. Even once they know the troll, they're struggling to have to come back and go through this again. This is literally why I have this shellmet here, so that I can actually get through this just to demonstrate. It is possible, I've seen that setup be done, but the thing is, even once you know the troll, doing that is a real challenge. And that's something that a lot of troll creators need to focus on, is that once the player knows the troll, they should be able to easily proceed through the level. So just for that one example of the Tower of Thwomps, you could make it easier like this by just giving the player some sort of defense against the thwomps. In this case I've used an invisible wall, but to be honest, anything that will keep the player safe from those thwomps would be a great idea. It's just something that once the player understands how to beat this part of the level, they can do it consistently. One thing you could do is hide this bottom block here and have it triggered by something, or maybe have a I don't know, an on-off block that releases a off-screen spike ball below, a simple mechanism that you can then release this invisible wall so the player doesn't see it at first, but once they know how to beat it, they can beat it. So on that note, some troll levels have these setups where once you've beaten a bunch of trolls, you then just have to do a platforming challenge that in any other level would not be a problem at all. But given that this is a troll level, it's a real challenge for the player to make their way over these awkward platforms after just having avoided all of the death that they have getting to this point. And this is a point where if they die either before or after it again, they'll begin getting frustrated at the level because they are doing the right thing for the trolls. They're just lacking the competence and the skill to get through these sections. Even if you have a player that has the skill level to get through these sections, not that this is a particularly difficult one, as I showed earlier, the invisible blocks that people seem to constantly put in their troll levels are just a nightmare. And they're a nightmare for a multitude of reasons, mostly because, as I said, this is not the easiest platforming section. I mean, I'm not going to say it's a difficult example, but when you get sections of levels that are not easy, to then have it taken away by something you had no control over is quite upsetting. Slightly off topic, talking just about those hidden blocks, I haven't seen a troll level ever in my life that has utilised them in a good way. Even if the platforming section isn't difficult, I don't understand why people keep putting these hidden blocks into their levels. They're not fun, they're not creative, and they just end up frustrating players and then alienating them from your game. It just means that players can't just enjoy the level, they stop trusting you, and then they'll start, like I'm doing here, every single jump they're checking for an invisible block before they even try to make the jump. So that was just a couple of examples of things to really not put into your troll levels. It's really key that your level is fair to the player and that it stays fun and not frustrating. Remember that although we are creating levels designed to confuse, misdirect and essentially kill the player, we're not looking for the player to become frustrated with us. We want the player to remain in control, or feel like they're in control at least. And most importantly, we need to remember this is a game, and it won't take a lot for a player to lose trust in you as a creator, never return to your levels and quit out of that level and not experience it the way that you want them to. A lot of people creating troll levels are doing it for those bigger streamers to look at, such as Carl, DGR, those sort of people, and they're just not going to look at your level if it's not getting consistent plays from people who understand what a good troll level is. And avoiding these sort of tropes, the hidden blocks, the soft locks, these basic things will make your level seem a little bit better. Defender, a incredible troll level creator, has released a full guide with a lot of collaboration from various people, including Carl Sagan, and I will link that document in the description as well. That talks more about some of these points that I've brought up, but also talks more about the psychology of troll levels as well. There is a lot to not put into a troll level, but next week we're going to be focusing on what you should put into a troll level. So that's what we're going to do next week, what makes good trolls against what makes bad trolls, and we're going to look at examples of both ones. So I look forward to seeing you all week. Thank you so much for tuning in to Troll School, and I'll see you next time.